Good afternoon. Most of us are vets, but I definitely do want to thank you for your service. It was important, it is important, and everybody who's serving right now, it's important. So thank you again. Understand something about franchising. It is a method of distribution. It is a method of expansion. It's just a different way of small business people getting into business. Not necessarily the best, not necessarily the worst. Depends on your situation, it depends on your goals, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. But all it is a method of expansion. Market benefits. It creates jobs, it creates economic opportunities. It improves access to consumers for branded products. Think about you're traveling. You're going down the road, you have a choice to take your little child into a restroom. You got a gas station on the left and you got a McDonald's on the right, or you have a Subway on the right. You know the cleanliness standards are in those locations simply because they're branded. And you've been to their other locations. An important fact about franchising is when you get into franchising, you're getting this gift of all of the other franchisees who have listened to the franchisor and allowed everybody to enforce brand standards. It creates local jobs and stability in communities. Franchising has the ability, kids don't have to travel outside of markets to work. The work is there in the community because of franchising. And in many markets, it is built, certainly since 1950s, after World War II, it's built on middle class. There are close to 900,000 franchised operations today. That has fueled the growth of wealth and middle class in the United States. You know, everybody thinks of McDonald's when they think of franchising. Maybe the most famous name in franchising, but it's not the only one. There are about 120 different industries today that are in franchising. My favorite, by the way, and it's a client of mine, is Miss Universe. Believe it or not, Donald Trump, that's Miss Universe. So anything that you think about today can be and is being franchised. If you look at the investment opportunities, about 13% of all franchises have an initial average investment of 13%. Rich is going to talk later about where you find that information out. But it's not all franchises that are for multimillionaires. There's a lot of opportunity. Think back what you heard about debt service and the ability to get debt. If all you need to get into franchising in some of these businesses is 10%, look at the opportunities, the range of franchising that you can get into. It's an amazing opportunity for people. By the way, one pushback. If you are able to get 90% debt for your business and you get into business, please crunch your numbers and make sure the business can afford that cash flow to pay off and service the debt service. We're not talking in franchising about buying a franchise or getting into business. We're talking about something that needs to be sustainable. You do not want to put your whole life in risk simply to get in if the business can't pay off the debt service. So be careful with debt. While you can get into it, you have to be sustainably in the business. Distribution of gross product. This is the spread, about 21% in quick service. If you look, you're going to see that about 40% of the industry is in food related, but it's a lot of different industries in there. Distribution of jobs in franchising, about 37% in quick service restaurants, business services, table, retail food. It's spread along the industry lines. We're going to spend a little bit of time on the history because it's fun and to understand where franchising came from. Franchising was used to control large swaths of territory in a time when there wasn't communications. So think about the Roman Empire. They wanted to control populations, defend the marketplace, provide services. These were all done through franchise relations. We're going to use Robin Hood as the example. King Richard is the franchisor, and King Richard decides to go on international expansion to the Middle East. He leaves behind his team, which is Prince John, kind of an evil guy. He has a field staff in the In the field, call the sheriff, not the nicest or best field consultant, but the Loxlear family, Robbins family, if you go back historically into what they were doing, they were franchisees. They were franchisees of the king. And their job was to maintain and control the territory, collect the tolls on the road, make sure that crops were harvested, and pay the king a royalty. So when you start to get into the terms in franchising, you start to look back to this ancient piece that goes there. One of the past chairmen of the IFA, I don't know if it's true, but I like to say it, a guy by the name of Lord Tarbutton, claims that the first franchisor was 200 BC. He actually claims to know the guy's name. He says his name is Locas, but there is really no basis. But it's kind of nice to think that it goes back that far. United States is a product of franchising. Dutch East India Company back in Jakarta signed the first franchise agreement in 1619. Henry Hudson explored Hudson Bay in New York as a franchisee. Company went bankrupt in 1799, by the way. London company with Jamestown. Everybody remembers the story of Jamestown. After the massacre, they got canceled, the franchise. It just didn't seem sustainable. Starts in England in commercial franchising in the brewery industry. Remember that the brewers wanted to find a downstream channel of distribution which they can control. They provided funding to folks that wanted to open up pubs, and those bars sold their brew. It was part of a sales leaseback. Most of those pubs were owned by the brewery to get the franchisee in there. By the way, companies today like 7-Eleven, they actually own the real estate that the franchisee is working in. So while time has passed, some of the techniques that were used back then are still being used. Many franchise systems also are manufacturers, and they're using franchising for the distribution of their products and services, as you'll see. Early United States, we grew as a country because of franchising. Governmental franchises, which were monopolistic, gave us the telephone systems, the railroad. The first lights went up in New York under a franchise to Edison. So franchising was part of what this country used to expand and to grow and to prosper. First franchisor in the United States, surprisingly, old Ben Franklin. 1731, Thomas Whitmore is his first franchisee in North Carolina. It's a printing franchise. Forward-thinking Ben, the third franchisee in the United States, was a woman. Ben was interested in green. Great entrepreneur. 1860s, you get Albert Singer in the sewing machine, and McCormick with his farm equipment of franchising. 1890s, you see GM, Ford. Martha Matilda had the first service franchise as a hair cuttery. Think of Coca-Cola, though, 1900s. Coca-Cola would be a nice, small, little regional company today, if not for franchising. They had some problems. Their product was heavy. It was glass bottles. It was full of water. What Coca-Cola said is, let's franchise the production of Coca-Cola. Now all I have to ship is the syrup. I ship the bottles once. They got water every place else. And that's where the world of Coca-Cola came from, simply through the use of distribution. Same thing came with the oil companies. When Ford was starting to manufacture cars, which, by the way, he sold through pharmacies, not through auto dealerships back then. Problem was, how do you get fuel? How do we move fuel? You start to franchise for the need. You'll start to see in the next couple of years, as alternative cars come on stream, franchise distribution of electric cars, gas cars, the actual power and the gas stations will start to come onto the marketplace because there'll be a need for it, and franchising can actually fill those gaps. Pre-World War II, you start to see the birth of 1920s A&W. Brands that you see today, Carvel, which is still around, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dairy Queen in the 40s. Then comes World War II. While the troops were sitting there in foxholes, so many of them had great ideas of what they were going to come home to, and the rest of them came home to the GI Bill and the ability now to leverage off of the ideas of the others. 1946, the most important act in franchising is done. It's the Lanham Act. The Lanham Act is a federal trademark rule that allows franchisors or licensors to license to you the brand under control without losing their intellectual property, which prior to 1946 wasn't existing. Very forward-thinking. We rely upon the Lanham Act today as the foundational document for franchising because it gives us the right to license to you all the brands and the service marks. Franchising, though, in post-World War II is substantially unregulated. This is the Wild West of business. It truly was. But you get some tremendous growth. McDonald's starts in 1955, goes public in 1965 with a tremendous stock offering. IHOP comes in, Burger King, Kemmons Wilson's, Holiday Inn, you all remember, and still existing. But these brands all exist today starting in that growth period of the 50s and 60s. What happens when you have unregulated growth is problems come up. We were seeing franchise opportunities of chinchilla farms, of weird types of investments. You had celebrities like Joe Namath, Jerry Lewis. Joe Namath had bars. Jerry Lewis had movie theaters. Muhammad Ali was scammed on possibly 50 different things. Minnie Pearl was the linchpin case in franchising. When Minnie Pearl, nice country western singer, she was the one that had the little tag down. She lent her name to a chicken franchise. The only problem was there was never any locations. So a lot of people got scammed. She had nothing to do with it, but her name got tarnished for a long period of time. 1969, state of California. Anything new comes from the state of California. They decided to regulate franchising for the first time. And Rich is going to discuss what we're talking about on pre-sale offering. But understand the rules about franchising in one little sentence. We generally don't regulate the relationship. We regulate the offering of a franchise. So when we talk to you later about the disclosure document, that gives birth out of the state of California in 1969. In 1979, our government works in mysterious ways. It took 10 years for them to understand that a good idea had been born. In 1979, there's a federal rule that comes in. The Federal Trade Commission oversees. The difference is that in the state of California and now 11, depending on who's counting, 11 to 14 states, there's a pre-sale registration so that somebody actually to see the document before you see it. At the federal level, which is in most of the states of the United States, you could be the first person other than the lawyer that drafted the document to ever see that document. It's not a regulated document in that sense. Why do companies franchise? Rapid expansion is the first place. Brand recognition and consistency. We are talking about sustainable consistency. When you walk into a McDonald's, you expect and you receive the same exact French fries whether you're here or in Maine or any place else on the planet. That doesn't mean it has to be exactly the same because they have different products in different markets. But you expect consistency, and that's why we use franchising. Rapid expansion, brand recognition, and consistency. Real important to you as franchisees. But all franchising is a form of a license. I license you my mark. I control how you use my mark, how you use my intellectual property. I don't control your day-to-day operations. I tell you the windows have to be clean, but you figure out how to clean them in some systems. All I care about is the cleanliness. I tell you that you have to be open from 9 in the morning till midnight. I don't tell you who to hire, how to hire them, what to pay them. I may give you suggestions. I may have a big, thick operating manual with procedures and forms, but you have the day-to-day control to meet the standards of the franchisor, but that's the second part of this definition. And then there's a financial relationship. In order for any of you to start a business and be a franchisor, I think it's what, $511 today, Rich? It used to be $500 for years. They just put it to to a CPI adjustment, so it might be $511. But if you pay me $500, I lend you my brand, and I control or influence or give you assistance in how you use it, you're my franchisee. That's all franchising is. It's real simple. And it's only at $500. It was meant to be broad. What's the key benefits? Why do we use franchising a lot? The capital is provided by you all and the banks, so franchisors don't have to go to the bank, borrow money, or raise capital by reducing their equity in their businesses by selling shares in the business. They establish the brand and they enforce their brand standards. If you're a franchisee or prospective franchisee and you open up a disclosure document and you see that the franchisor is enforcing brand standards, they're doing it for two reasons. One, they want to protect their brand, but two, they want to protect the rest of the franchisees because you can be damaged by the bad acts of the other franchisees in the system. So some litigation is bad, but read the litigation. Some litigation is important litigation because it protects the franchisees. We use it for market expansion, heightened brand awareness. Franchisees are responsible, and it provides local drive. What that means is the franchisee is a member of the community generally. They understand where they should advertise. They understand what's taking place. They know how to deal with the churches and deal with the schools and deal with the synagogues. That's what we like about franchisees. Key advantages for all of you: you're getting an established brand, you're getting tested systems of operation, brand standards, training, support from the franchisor. This last one, though, is really important. You're going to get support from other franchisees, not on general things. You can pick up the phone, call a franchisee who's been in the business for 5 or 10 years, and say, I have a problem. And their response is going to be, I had the same problem when I was at your stage in the same exact brand with the same exact system, and they can give you the specific answer right there on the phone that they know worked. You have franchisee advisory councils. I mean, these systems build up. One codicil, though. That only happens in well-established, well-managed, well-structured, well-capitalized franchisors. Do not fall into the trap that every franchisor is good. There's about 3,500 franchisors today, probably about 8,000 in my career. There were great franchisors, there were bad franchisors, there were franchisors in the middle. Some of the newer franchisors are phenomenal. Look at the management team, see how experienced they are. Read the documents when you start to get them. But don't fall into the trap that every franchisor is somehow remarkably great. There are great ones and there are not. We're going to try to give you some tools today so you can determine the difference. Most businesses fail in the United States not because the product is bad. And it's not because the service is bad, and it's not because the consumer didn't want the product. They fail because of the unknown. We failed because we could not determine how much working capital we needed. We were told that we were going to get into business for $100,000 by our Uncle Alex, and we needed $110,000. Well, I have to tell you, when I only have $100,000 and I need $110,000, $10,000 is the most expensive territory in the planet because I'm about to go out of business, and had I known what my investment was, I wouldn't be going through that problem. Franchising has this wonderful item 7 that lays out each line of investment in ranges. The bottom line even says working capital. Behind that are pages upon pages of horribly written notes, because most of the time they're written by lawyers. No offense.
Wait until I start talking.
I know. But these notes will explain to you the business. Read the notes carefully. You're going to be able to build a business plan based on that. By the way, you want to touch on the business plan comment from earlier?
Oh, yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about this in the context of the franchise disclosure document itself, but the statement was made earlier that a good franchisor will help with the business plan. I'll explain why a little bit later, but the franchisor has a lot less leeway in terms of how much they can how much assistance they can provide a prospective franchisee before you sign up. Once you sign the franchise agreement, you've made the investment, you're in the system, then the franchisor can provide a whole lot more information in terms of revenues and costs and profits and how other units are doing. Their hands are a little bit more tied before you signed up. Not totally tied, they still have some flexibility. But I'm just, the point was, earlier on, will a franchisor help with my business plan? They will if you've signed up. However, if you haven't signed the franchise agreement yet and you go to the franchisor and say, how does this business plan look? Am I going to do this well? They're somewhat restricted in terms of how they can respond to that question. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Wanted to get that correction out because you might think that franchisors are not doing something they should. They can't. You're going to get to understand what the continual costs are because you'll look at the documents. There's about 35% of franchisors today have what we call a financial performance representation, item 19. In there, you're going to find a lot about unit economics and things like that generally. Franchises are going to get marketing assistance. They'll get system accounts. Sometimes franchisors, think of it. I am the Mako franchisee. I do body work. Isn't it great that my franchisor has signed up a deal with Hertz Rent-A-Car? So when the local Hertz guy has a ding on a car, it shows up at my location. Franchisors establish national accounts all the time. Better able to compete with this competition. And one of the things you realize, and you'll hear us say it, you do not own the franchisor's trademark. You do not own the goodwill that comes from that trademark. But you have transactional usage. What does that mean? When I go to sell my franchise, the buyer will generally pay me more if I'm part of a great system because the business is worth more. So you get value out of being part of that franchise system, and it improves the exit value of your business. So if I have two businesses, I have Michael's Hamburgers doing $1 million of sales, and I have a Five Guys doing $1 million worth of sales. Both have the same exact bottom line. Which one's going to sell for more? You got it. And that's because the brand has value and it leverages over to you. Key disadvantages, and there are disadvantages. You're going to pay the franchisor for the length of the contract for being part of this system. And sometimes you're going to look at the franchisor and say, what did you give me yesterday? I mean, I already learned that stuff. You're not giving me anything new. Why should I continue to pay them? Why? Because you bought into a system. You paid a franchise fee to join the club. You pay a royalty to stay in the club. That's what you're paying your money for. But you'll sometimes feel, why are you paying? You'll have loss of independence. I like my burgers cooked differently. I want to put something else on my pizza. I want to stay open less time than my franchisor wants me to stay open. I'm part of a system. The other franchisees in the system are looking for consistency. They need me to perform as well as they perform. I have to give up a little bit of independence when I become a franchisee. It's not that you can't localize a business, but you can't localize it independently. So for example, if I go to Rhode Island, I can get some of those fine McDonald's French fries with vinegar. If I'm a franchisee in Connecticut, unless McDonald's tells me I could do that, I may not be able to. So the brand picks what is going to be localized and what's going to be changed. The franchisee can discuss it. The franchisee, through their advisory council, through their conversation with their field staff, through their conversation with the franchisors. We're in a world of great communications. So there's influence, but the decisions are going to be made by the franchisor. You don't want to be overly dependent on a franchisor. You're an independent business operator. As I mentioned, risk from poorly performing franchisees. If you become a franchisee, and I hope you do, and you go into one of your fellow franchisees' location and you find it not to being up to standard, they're hurting you. Even if you have a franchise in Illinois and you walked into a location in San Diego. This is a localized world today. You go on and look at comments on Yelp, they affect the brands. So poorly performing franchisees. Unrealistic financial expectations is probably the biggest concern for me. You have a level of income, you think that the brand is going to throw off a certain amount of money. It takes time for most businesses to throw off money. So when you're thinking about getting into business, make certain you have enough money to live on, at least in the style that you can live on. Maybe not the style you're accustomed to, because we all have to suffer a little bit in the early days of any business. They don't go cash positive often the first day. That's why we recommend working capital. You're going to work really hard to get your business successful. But make sure that your financial expectations are right. Ask the other franchisees in the system, when can I expect to make X? It's a great question. They'll answer it for you, most of them. And sometimes you'll get stuck on territorial restrictions. The trend today is not to give territories. And the reason for that is that the consumer would like to find your location where they want to find it. Think of Starbucks. Great thing about Starbucks is I can turn around, and there's one when I want a good cup of coffee or an average cup of coffee. Sorry, because I always go to McCafe myself. But so don't expect, understand why if you need territory rights. The problem with territorial rights, keep in mind, is I give you a 3-mile radius, and no other franchisee can come to the market with your brand. That doesn't stop the competition from coming in. All that does is you've created a market demand for a product, and a competition comes in, so you don't get the advantage of your other franchisee brethren putting money into the advertising fund. You don't get the fact that the supply chain costs could have gone down had there been more locations. Worry about your business. Don't worry about the future of it. Rely upon conversations with other franchisees and the franchisor to find out what you really need. But territorial restrictions is sometimes bothers people. Other disadvantages: potential encroachment, risk of termination, risk of non-renewal, restrictions on ability to transfer. Franchisor, believe it or not, actually took the relationship seriously. He picked you as a franchisee once they got to it. He doesn't necessarily like who you want to pick as a franchisee. They want to approve it. And they will reasonably review that person because they'd like to have a new franchisee operating your location. But some people find that to be a problem. Terms of successor agreements, intern restrictions. There are restrictions in a franchise agreement which are beneficial, but for some people, they're going to feel like straitjackets. Remember, you don't buy a franchise. No one's selling you a franchise. You invest in a limited license to use the franchisor's marks and systems per the terms of a contract. So when you hear somebody say, I bought a franchise, they got a license to operate under a brand, and they bought a bunch of assets, which they do own, to use under the brand. But the shorthand of you buy a franchise isn't actually true. Franchise relationship, it's based upon a contract, and it's a seriously lengthy contract. Your promises are detailed in franchise agreements, licenses, and operations manuals. Operations manuals is a key and interesting part of franchising. When McDonald's first came out, if you remember the old stories, you walk to an outside counter. They serve burgers, cheeseburgers, and a milkshake, if I think in French fries. Now you go out and you can get, apples. And all these, I had this great wrap the other day. The thing is that they got there because, and other franchisors get there, because the manual gives a franchise system the ability to evolve. New products, new services, new methods. So you will get into a relationship where the franchisor will change. Think of Kentucky Fried Chicken. It used to be Kentucky Fried Chicken, and it's now. Then, back then it was one type of chicken. The Colonel only knew how to make one type of chicken. And today they have boneless chicken. The products have changed over time. because we have this wonderful ability in franchising to evolve. It is a vital force.
And to your point, Michael, I mean, that's sort of the good and the bad, right? The good is that you get a franchisor who's willing to evolve and change things over time. But the flip side to that is you're not sure of what the rules of the game now are going to be in 10 years. So it's a lot of sort of, as Michael said, mutual trust that the franchisor, that these people, that this brand is going to be the one that's going to grow and is going to help you thrive. Because no franchisor can possibly say, I won't change anything over 10 years. And if they did, you wouldn't want them anyway.
No, they'd be out of business. I mean, think of a brand that hasn't changed and has been successful. None. They go out of business. The last one is a really important point. You'll be sitting down with franchise salespeople. Now, franchise salespeople are gifted folks. We train them. And I promise you, and I was joking about it earlier, if we came together and came up with some strange idea that didn't exist, I promise you in about an hour I can get most of you to buy a franchise. Not even the product doesn't even exist. Franchise salesmen are gifted. The thing that you have to remember is when you're going through, listen carefully. If they make a promise to you, and it's an important promise that they're making, look into the legal document you're about to sign. If they're not in the legal documents, that right didn't exist. Your promises have to be in writing. So if somebody says, don't worry, we're not going to do that to you, that's great. Just put it in the doc. There are 3,500 active franchisors. One of the things that franchisors like to do is grow. Most franchisors don't want to hear about promises that are not in the document anyway. So the franchise salesman is generally not doing what the franchisor wants them to do. They're trying to make a sale so they can get their commission check. But if it's not in the franchise document, that promise may or may not exist. But don't call up the franchisor and say, he promised, because I'm telling you now it needs to be in the contract. Fair?
Absolutely.
You'll sometimes hear franchisors say, my franchisee partner. We're not your partners. We don't have a fiduciary responsibility to you. We as franchisors will make decisions based upon the macro of the brand, and you're going to be interested in the micro of your location. That's not what partners do.
One interesting one, Michael, is I had a franchisee who said, I want to put in a provision in the contract that says you'll never change the system in the way that hurts my outlet. And my response on behalf of the franchisor was, I'm almost sure that over a 20-year term, we will make decisions that are not good for your particular outlet, because the franchisor isn't focused on your particular outlet. It's focused on the good of the brand. And again, part of the relationship, you're buying in because you understand that over the long haul, you want somebody who's focused on the brand, not somebody who's going to make decisions based on one or two people that might not really be best for the whole system.
You share a common brand, but not necessarily in every single decision, a common interest. Franchisor is not out to hurt you, don't get me wrong. But the franchisor has to make decisions for thousands of locations, 100 locations, or tens of locations, and they may not be perfect for your location, so they're not your partner on this. They're also not your parents. You'll sometimes hear franchisors talk about the parent. Now, there's a lot of things that feel like a parent-child. My kids growing up, every time I taught them how to do things, I taught my son how to play baseball, I taught him how to play football. I would counsel them. When they did something good, I'd congratulate them. And at the point in time, they turned into teenagers, and I was an idiot, and they were the smartest things on the planet. And then they reached maturity, and we kind of came back together again because they recognized the roles and the relationship. That all exists in franchising, okay? There's this warm, fuzzy feeling of you come into the system, you come and you learn, and a field staff will come in and they'll counsel you, and the franchisor will reward you, and you'll get a plaque that says Best Franchisee of the Month, and you get all that, and then you'll get to a point where you'll say, what did you give to me lately? You get into this adolescent phase, and you grow through it. But I didn't, you know, my kids, my son didn't pick me as a parent. You get the chance to pick your franchisor, okay? They're not your parents, it's a business. There's a great relationship. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing better than a great franchisor-franchise relationship. You will go to weddings and christenings and bar mitzvahs and funerals. This will become a family. But it's a business. Don't get trapped in the fact of the relationship. It's not right for everyone. If you are a true entrepreneur, and what I mean by a true entrepreneur is I want to set my own course. I want to trim my own sails. I want to pick the roads that I want to go down. I want to do everything myself. You can't be a franchisee because somebody else is going to have restrictions on what you do. So you are going to be a risk taker. You're going to risk your capital. You're going to risk your family's time. You're going to risk a lot of things. You voluntarily have to agree to follow a system. You can innovate. You can lead. You can motivate. You can outperform the competition within the boundaries. I mean, think of the mission as a soldier, as a sailor. We're given a goal to do something. The goal is sketched out. If we have what we're told to do, between getting there and the start of it, we all learned how to innovate. We all learned how to outproduce the orders that we got so that we had a better resolution at the end of the day. That's what makes it so exciting to go from the military into franchising, is we all learned that stuff. That was the easy part of life. Now you can take that drive and that skill and become great business owners, because you will be business owners. So the skills you learn in the service make us outstanding franchise candidates, and franchisors know it. Two types of franchising: product distribution and business format franchising. You all, 90% of you or more, are going to be looking at the second one, but it's nice to know what the first one is. Think Ford Motor Company, think Fruhoff, think Coca-Cola. These are companies that do pre-sale and post-sale services. The brand is the most important thing. They are selling a product generally manufactured by the franchisor. Strong identification with brands. So you find this in soft drink, beer bottlings, auto accessories, farm equipment. So we manufacture it, and that's what we do. But you'll then see Joe's Ford, because the brand, the product is what we're generally controlling there, not the day-to-day operation. The next type of franchising is business format franchising. That's what we're discussing here. In a business format system, the franchisor is not necessarily the manufacturer. Most times they're not. They are giving you a method for delivering a product or service. Go back to what I said earlier about McDonald's, easy brand to remember. They served hamburgers, cheeseburgers, French fries, and a thick shake. They weren't in the hamburger business. They were in the food distribution business, because today you walk in there and you can get chicken and fish and a whole bunch of other stuff. So when you're looking at business format franchising, business format franchisors are providing you a system to deliver a product or service consistently to the consumer. It is how you open the door and how you close the door at night. Those are the two differences. There's a lot more consistency and a lot more support that comes out of a business format franchisor. Ownership structures. From the early days of franchising up until probably, I'd say 15 years ago, franchising was a very mom and pop business. I went to the franchisor and I said, I'd like to buy a franchise, meet my wife, or my wife would have gone and say, meet my husband. We're going to run this thing day to day, and little Johnny and Janie are going to come in and work with us, because the family was about to run the business. Okay? That's single unit franchising. It has been around. It's still around. It is used by a lot of franchisors. Location is generally supervised by the franchisee, and it's the oldest form. That's what the relationship looks like. There's a contract relationship directly between the franchisor and the single unit franchisee, and the money flows between those parties. It's a one-to-one relationship. Very nice, very comfortable. Everybody can understand that. Now that you're into the modern world, over the last 15 or maybe 20 years, people are now looking at franchising and they're buying more than one. And today, 53 to 54% of all franchisees own more than one franchise. Generally, each location has a single unit agreement, and the developer, this franchise owner, he has an obligation now to open up a certain amount of locations, generally in a territory that's clearly defined, in a set period of time. 10 locations, 3 years, City of Atlanta. That's the relationship. What you'll see, though, is they're going to sign two different agreements. They're going to sign a development agreement, which is not really a franchise agreement, but it's an agreement that gives me the right and obligation to open up 10 locations in 3 years in the City of Atlanta. For each of the locations I open, I will generally execute an individual franchise agreement. Now, remember, 10 units, 3 years, City of Atlanta. I open up this unit in 2013, I signed an agreement. 2014, I go to open up my second location, and I open up the disclosure document and the agreement, I say, wow, royalties went up 0.5 point. You're signing generally the then current agreement. You need to ask, if you are a developer, what am I signing? Read the development agreement at the time. Am I signing the same agreement for all the locations? Or does the franchisor have the right to change the agreement during the term? You will pay a fee or a deposit that's non-refundable for that development rights. In some agreements, most agreements, if your franchise fee, it's based upon what the franchise fee is, and part of the development fee will be applied to each of the franchise fees going on. And we'll describe these terms to you. But the franchise agreement, the franchise fee is what you pay to get into the system. The royalty is what you pay as a continuing fee. Development fee you generally pay once. Okay? Master franchising. We're going to get a little bit unique onto the next two pieces, where I have a relationship directly with my franchisor and my franchisee directly, whether it's a development agreement or single unit. We just discussed that. Now I go to a franchisor and I want to buy the master franchise rights. Most franchisors today do not offer master franchise rights in the United States. They still use them internationally, and they're becoming less and less. Why? I buy from you, Mr. Franchisor, the rights to be you in the state of Florida. I go find my own franchisees. I have my own disclosure document. I train them. I support them. I collect their money. I take care of their problems. Now, in the real world, some of that is split between the master franchisee and the franchisor. But theoretically, I became the franchisor for Florida. And for that, I split, generally, my franchise fee and my royalty with the franchisor who gave me the rights to the state of Florida. So it's a bifurcated area. Again, you see this concept of a guarantee of I will open up as a master franchisee, certain amount of units in a certain period of time in a certain territory. What you see here is kind of a rendition of where it is. There's a relationship between the franchisor and the master franchisee, and then there's a contractual relationship between the master franchisee and the single or multi-unit sub-franchisee. The one thing that's missing there, has anybody noticed something that's missing? There's no direct relationship generally between the franchisor and the sub-franchisees. Okay? It is a separate relationship. They have different disclosure documents if the franchisor is doing things. So there's not a direct relationship. But now look at this next structure. Area representation. If you look at brands like Subway, mailboxes, etc., firehouse subs, decorating den. They use a concept called area rep. What an area representative is, it's a commissioned salesperson and it's a commissioned field staff. It is a quick way of selling franchises. Again, they pay for the rights to be the area rep. They guarantee a certain development level. They provide site development assistance to the franchisees they find. They do some localized training. They do field support. But they're mainly there to help the franchisor sell franchise in the market. Very quick way to grow in franchising. Problem with it, it also has generally has a heightened failure rate because the area reps, many of them, are structured to sell franchises, not service the franchisee. In some systems, they've cleaned that up, but some systems that use area reps just grow very quickly, and the franchisees are not as well served. So you got to be somewhat careful when you're buying a franchise from a system that uses an area rep. Talk to the franchisees in that market to find out how well you're being served by the area rep so that you know that you're getting the proper level of service. Franchisor signs an agreement with the area rep who contractually has to find franchisees and support them, but that's a relationship between the franchisor and the area reps. There is no contractual relationship between the franchisee and this commissioned hand of the franchisor. There's also, though, a direct relationship. Your franchisor is your franchisor. There's no intermediate on there. So in some ways, this is a better system. And that's one of the things you have to look at. How well are you served in those systems? Conversion franchising. It's either for somebody who's experienced or I'm in the chicken business. Kentucky Fried Chicken comes into the market. Hey, would you like to convert to become a Kentucky Fried Chicken franchisee? You might want to do that. So you switch from the one brand you're in to another brand. You'll pay fees and training fees and location fees. They will vary slightly. Most franchisors, when they convert, realize that the franchisee may have invested in a computer system 2 years ago, and they'll let the franchisee use that for a little while longer. They'll require the franchisee to take down all their signs and put up new ones, but they might not make them change all of the furniture and fixtures in there right away. So there's a little bit of play in there. I happen to love conversion franchising. It works very well when the franchisor understands what the pitfalls are. The biggest pitfall for us on the franchisor side is that the person who we're converting has their own habits. Oh, and by the way, they are a true entrepreneur. So they are constantly going to be wanting to say things like, son, you don't understand. I'm always son. Son, you don't understand my marketplace. We do things differently here. And they constantly have to be reminded that they're now part of a system. So you invest a little bit more working with a conversion franchisee, but they have a customer base. And the beauty of it is you can walk into a person's business and look and see how well they treat their own brand. If they treat their brand with respect, if the place is clean, if the customers are happy, as an experienced operator, you can look and probably in 5 minutes figure out why they're not doing so well. But you know that they're trying well with their brand. So if they're treating their own brand well, there's a good chance they'll treat your brand well. That's what I happen to like about conversion franchising, because I can see how the operator is actually working in his own business. Dual branding, you're not seeing this as much as you used to see it. It was a freight train that was just on the track, and we'd stick 2 or 3 different brands in a box and come up with a reason. Companies like Taco Bell and KFC use them a lot. They're on the same company. The same general holding company is in there. And it's the use of the same piece of real estate to serve different day parts. Day parts are breakfast is a day part, lunch is a day part, dinner is a day part, get the sense. So if I am in the donut business, I do a lot of my sales from morning to like noontime, 1 o'clock. And then my afternoons, I'm just sitting there kind of looking at myself, except for the person that wants to come in for a cup of coffee. Wow, let me stick in some ice cream. Now the afternoon traffic will come in. It works well in some areas. It doesn't necessarily work in all areas because some businesses are very real estate constrained. And sometimes you want to be on the going home side to sell a product or the going to work side selling a product. So you have to be somewhat looking. So if you're looking at dual branding, which you'll see in some businesses, ask other franchisees that are dual branded in that system, how you're going. You get the sense there's a lot of people to ask questions to in franchising. But if you're going into a situation, ask how it's going. Non-traditional mass gathering, you're going to a Cubs game, and you don't necessarily go there to get a hot dog. You don't necessarily go there to get ice cream. You don't necessarily go there to get a Coca-Cola or a Pepsi. But you happen to be there and you get hungry. That's why we find people in mass gathering locations, stadiums, arenas, ballparks, airports, universities, hospitals. You want to be where there's a high degree of traffic. And if you're with a recognized brand that people know, they're going to naturally come up to your counter and want to have your burger or your ice cream or your offering. That's the beauty of being there. You have a constant traffic in these locations. Retro franchising is a nice touch. I love used franchises. I really do. I have a franchisor that has a bunch of franchise company-owned locations and they want to sell them off. I now can see exactly what that location is producing. I can see the labor I can hire because they're working there already. I can see the condition. I can see what my customers are. I can see what the road conditions are. Buying a used franchise is just terrific because depending on the franchisor, you may get a whole brand new franchise agreement with an existing customer base, so you don't have to wait to grow your customer base. People don't have to find that you opened. You know exactly what's going on, and you can see if the trend has been going up or if the trend's going down. One promise to make to yourself. The guy who was owning the business before and the sales were going down, you're not always smarter than they were. Don't always assume that because their sales are going down, they were bad operators and you're so brilliant that you're going to turn that business around. You hope to understand why the business has gone down if it's going down. Okay, but don't assume that the business is going down because that tired old man was tired and old. It just may be the roads have been changed. Route 66 is no longer as popular as it was once. Understand what's going on in the business, but buying a used franchise is a great idea. Also remember that if you are not truly franchisee material, a whole bunch of other ways to get into business. Company owned, you can start your own business, you can get into joint ventures, cooperatives. Anybody here know a brand called Carpet One? It's cooperative, it's not a franchise. Ace Hardware, some of them are cooperative, some of them are franchises. They're part of buying groups. A lot of people making money on e-commerce. Franchising, again, where we started off, it's an opportunity for growth. It's a great place for you to get into. But consider your alternatives when you're looking at investing. You know, we only have one shot at this. The critical decision. The right franchise can help you overcome obstacles to starting. The wrong franchise may not have the capabilities for supporting you. Understand all franchisors are not the same. They're not all McDonald's, they're not all Dunkin' brands, they're not all lots of things. That doesn't mean, though, that a small, immature franchisor, which has a great idea, isn't a good opportunity. I mean, everybody started with 1 or 2 or 3 locations, and they grew to something nice. So look at the franchisor, but understand they all don't have the same resources, they all don't have the same services, they all have different obligations in their franchises. What makes for a successful franchise? Their ability to create critical mass, the fact that they have product expertise, they have operating systems, marketing expertise, ability to support. Ask about the operating costs. There are franchise systems that are very large. The franchisor makes a lot of money on the products they sell to the franchisees, which is perfectly fine, so long as the franchisee has a reasonable bottom line and they're not getting too much royalty on top of it. There's an economic relationship to being in business. So franchisors today choose where they make their money from. They can make it on the lease of the real estate. They can make it on royalty, on gross sales. They can make it on the supply chain. They can make it on a whole host of ancillary fees. When you're comparing franchisors, understand the economics of the relationship and what you're doing on that. You want to take a look and see if the franchisor can provide training. Now, training is important, and there should be some relationship between the value of a franchise and the training. Franchisor that says, I'm such a brilliant company with such a hard concept, we're going to charge you $75,000 franchise fee, and our training is 3 days. Something doesn't feel right. You want a franchisor that has a training program that will teach you how to consistently, sustainably operate the business. It's not enough to learn how to flip the burgers and to pour a Coke. It's not enough just to learn how to open the door and close the door at night. You have to learn how to hire people and fire people and do your banking and understand the financial statements and the supply chain and who do you call and all that. You want a training program which is robust enough, because you all weren't trained how to do that in the military. I wasn't trained how to do that in the military. It's a new career. We're about to learn a whole new MOS. That's what you want to look at. You want to see what the franchisor does on training. Can the franchisor motivate you? Can they motivate the staff? When you go to a meeting of franchisees and you speak to franchisees, are they excited to be part of the business? I mean, it is great to, I've been in some great franchise systems. It is just the most juiced up thing you ever want to do. You want to just sit there and cheer, okay? Does the franchisor have the right ability to motivate? Do the other franchisees feel motivated? Does the franchisor not only have the ability to protect you and enforce its standards, do they? And do they adapt? Do you have a franchisor, as Rich was talking about, that hasn't changed its manual since 1982? Have they looked at what the competition is doing? You know, remember this whole concept of incumbent inertia. General Motors and Ford. They looked at Toyota when Toyota came up and said, cheap Japanese piece of garbage. They're not going to do anything. In fact, I remember going with my dad to a Chevy dealer one time, and his promotion was giving away a Honda. It says, we're not just going to give you a tire, we're going to give you a whole car. So in case your car needs to be repaired, you can drive this piece of garbage. They sat there and they looked at it and they ignored it. Franchisors don't want to be Ford and General Motors of the past. They want to be Ford and General Motors of the current. They're going to innovate against the competition, and that's what you want to see. Do they have the ability? Do they have a test kitchen? Have they come out with new products? How do they introduce those products? Ask the franchisees, are they involved at any level in a discussion about new products or the removal of products which are not selling? Listen, again, we're talking about a communicative franchisor. You always want to listen to how they're dealing with it. Where to start your search? There's a bunch of places that we can point you to. I will always, 100% of the time, point you to that organization, which I'm really proud of, the International Franchise Association. It is a remarkable trade association. It's about 50 years old. I am not going to tell you that all of the members of the IFA are great franchisors. They're not. But the active members of the IFA go to classes. It's a great place to start. You go there, there's a section on the webpage that will say something about franchise opportunities. Look there for what you're looking for. If you get my book, Franchising for Dummies, and I apologize, I didn't have copies when I came here. It will tell you the first thing to look for is, what do you feel comfortable in operating? Don't think about the company. Think of yourself first, what you and the family would be comfortable doing. Then find the categories and find them in the IFA at www.franchise.org. There are some other really good guides. Franchise Update magazine, run by Therese Thilgen and Gary Gardner, is a magazine series that we as professionals read all the time. It's a great thing. They also have some websites, franchise.update.com. Bob Bond has a book. You find it in a bookstore. It's about $39 if I remember. It's a compendium of franchise opportunities, unvetted, but it will give you information about franchise fees and royalties and training times and where they're located and a little bit about the company. So it's not a bad guide. You can pick it up in any bookstore. Franchise Handbook is a publication you can get at trade shows. Not every franchisor markets through a trade show. Most don't. But you can pick up a copy of that Franchise Handbook at that place. There's some great publications. Inc. magazine obviously is a good place to learn. Entrepreneur magazine comes out each year with the Entrepreneur 500. So it's not an accurate listing. It's just a compendium, and it's a good place to get information, but please don't rely upon them as picking your franchise for you. Web-based locations, again, start with franchise.org. Look at the VetFran members. When you get to the IFA webpage, you'll find a section there on VetFran. Remember, we are a trade association. We are not telling you that every VetFran member is a great franchise. Most of them are. You need to do your homework. Don't rely upon the fact that they are VetFran members to necessarily invest in. All they are is members of the IFA. They're probably good people, but you got to do your homework. Don't rely upon us just putting them on a list, please. I'll feel really bad if you do that. And then there are other sites you can look at, Be The Boss, Bison.com. Those are places you should also look. There are then franchise brokers. Two of them that I list there is FranNet and FranChoice. Others can be found at the IFA. Brokers are not multi-listing brokers like when you bought a home. They don't represent all franchisors. In fact, a de minimis number of franchisors, not a lot, but a little, actually use the service of brokers. And they pay brokers a lot of money to find them candidates. So the brokers are interested in selling to you the opportunities they have available in their cadre of clients to sell. Good guys, good experience, but understand no matter what they say, they work for the franchisor. And if you're interested in a particular brand which they don't represent, you won't see it through them. So don't be lazy. This is a job that you have to do yourself. Brokers are not to run away from, but understand their limitations. They're not multi-unit listing. They're not listing brokers that are going to show you every house or every franchise in the marketplace. Franchisee lawyers. You do not go into a franchise relationship without having a lawyer part of them. I tell you to go get a consultant, but none of the consultants other than brokers work with franchisees. There are a cadre of law firms or lawyers that work primarily with franchising. It's a complicated investment. There are good franchises, there are bad franchises, there are places, as Rich will tell you, that can be negotiated. An average lawyer will take you down a path of trying to negotiate all these unfair terms. They'll lose you the opportunity to get into great brands because there are reasons that it's there, and a good franchisee lawyer knows why those clauses are in the agreement. So you want to find a good lawyer. At the IFA, there are, in the supplier form, when you go to this franchise.org, you'll look at suppliers, you'll find lawyers, and there'll be a lot of law practitioners. The unfortunate thing is that you can't tell really who's a franchisor lawyer and who's a franchisee lawyer. You can email Rich or myself. We've given you emails, and we can tell you where it is, and we'll introduce you to good franchisee lawyers. Keep in mind, the lawyer doesn't have to be in your hometown. You don't have to meet him. They're going to be able to look at the documents. Most of them can get the documents immediately anyway. But again, don't ever go into a franchise relationship without having legal advice. Reality check. Having a disclosure document doesn't make you a great franchisor. Franchisors fail, and it's your responsibility to conduct the due diligence, not anybody else's. Become an educated investor. There's a great publication from the Federal Trade Commission, which you can get online. I recommend strongly that you get that as your first document. Buying a franchise, a consumer guide. Make sure you understand the concept. Look at understand franchisees. You got to be knowledgeable at the market area you want to be in. This is what the franchisor is looking to see. And they want to make sure you have the financial resources to succeed. Remember what your military training gave you? You're going to be given a set of brand standards, a mission to accomplish. And you're going to execute against the mission. We've all done that thing. The winners in franchising are going to take that system and make it better. They're going to execute it better. George Patton once said, never tell people how to do things. Tell them what to do and they will surprise you with their ingenuity. That's what you guys did in the military. That's what franchisees do every single day of the week. Do a self-review. Can you follow a system? Will you accept coaching? Are you a team player? Are you willing to learn new skills? Do you work well with people? Are you self-reliant? Yeah, you should be. Can you trust? Everything's not going to be in the franchise agreement. It can't be. The operating manual is going to change. Management will change. People will change. Can you trust that somebody else has your back as you're going down this? And do you understand outstanding customer service? Because the other franchisees in a great system do, and they're relying upon you to do that. Are you organized? Good at time management? Able to plan? Can you delegate? I mean, we all learned how to delegate in the military. Can you delegate? Because you can't possibly be there every single moment of the day. Are you creative but not too creative? And do you understand technology? Because franchising today is very technologically driven. Don't forget to talk to your family about the franchise you're getting into. They're going to be part of this. Don't forget to talk to your friends about it. How much can you afford to invest? How much can you afford to lose? I'm kind of old school. We can borrow money on 401ks. If the business fails, you've borrowed money on your 401k. Understand that you need to protect yourself. This is just a business. Make sure you can afford to lose what you might lose in the business. How much do you need to earn? Do your analysis. Will your family and friends support your decision? Will you not be embarrassed to say what you're about to get into? Some franchise systems, who wants to clean toilets? You make a lot of money cleaning toilets. Some of those janitorial franchises do pretty well. And they're low investment, by the way. And does the values of the franchisors match yours? That's the key point. You want to be part of a system for 20 years where you respect the fact that everybody else in the system generally supports your values. It's real important. What should you look for? Start with a franchisor that has a great idea is not enough. They were saying before something with 5 locations. There are franchise systems that have no locations. Make sure that it's not a great idea. They should be profitable, and they should be profitable in more than one location. And you want to make certain that, they're in similar areas to yours. Just because the franchisor has a location downtown Chicago or 42nd Street in Manhattan or in the Miracle Mile someplace doesn't necessarily mean they're going to work well in Peoria. It's a different marketplace. See if their locations are in similar markets to yours, because that's what you want to replicate. There's a workbook that's in the back of the dummies book, and the IFA is using it today, called Making the Franchise Decision. It's a free. Go to the IFA website, and you can download it. That book is about 65 pages of questions, also places where you can fill in information. So it's a good tool as you're doing a due diligence to make sure you capture the information. Anybody who's bought a house at some point realizes that they forgot what the other house looks like, this will give you a nice place to ask questions and write it down. Make sure that the franchisor measures up. Understand if they have the management capabilities to drive the business. They should have operated the business for a sufficient time to understand it. Their management, you are buying into their management. Make sure their management is qualified and capable and experienced. Make sure that the franchisor has adequate financial. Look at their financial statements. They're in the book. Make sure they have a management team worth a damn and that they can support you. Understand if they're knowledgeable about the business. Look at these issues. What is their brand promise? What do they want to tell? What should the consumer be thinking about as they're driving by the business at 60 miles an hour? And does the consumer recognize what the brand promise of that franchisor is? Not just the product, but the whole brand experience. You want to understand what their locations are. All of these attributes, you want to make certain that they're knowledgeable about the business. They should be able to provide you with support, initial training, continual training, enforcement of the brand standards. They also have to make sure that the brand stays fresh, that it's constantly on the cutting edge to compete against the competition, because your competition may not necessarily be franchised. It could be the guy down the block. You want to make certain that they can compete. You want to make certain it's a proven product or service. Some businesses will franchise fads. Some of these fads will last 10 years, some will last 5 years. There's a couple of fads going on right now which are very popular. You want to make certain that the business has legs to meet your needs. So look at whether the business is fed. It's real easy. Go to the web, read articles about that industry. Just don't rely upon the franchisor. Read about the industry you're getting into and make judgment calls whether the business is going to be successful long term. They should be based on an organized concept. They should be simple to operate. And you need to be able to do it consistently. Unit economics. You have enough information between the World Wide Web and the internet and the franchise disclosure document to actually build a financial model for most franchise systems. It may not be laid out like it's just handed to you. You may have to work through the documents, but do not go into a franchise business without knowing what its unit economics are. Speak to the other franchisees in the business, understand when their break-even point came, understand what their investment was, understand what their sales were. Lots of places to get information. Make sure you spend the time to understand the business and its unit economics. Initial and continuing fees, they're the least important things to worry about. And that may sound funny, because somebody may charge you $40,000 and somebody may charge you $20,000 and somebody may charge you $50,000. You can say, Michael, how do you, what do you mean it doesn't mean anything? $50,000 against $20,000. If that investment gets me a bigger return, if a franchisor that's charging me 10% royalty gets me a better bottom line than the franchisor that's charging me a 3% royalty because they're providing me better products and services and marketing and my gross sales and my bottom line is better, do I really care what my royalty is? What I care about is how much I'm going to take home. Understand what the economics are. Don't focus in on I'm picking brand A because their royalty is lower. That is the silliest thing I hear franchisees talk about all the time. Because the service level, the bottom line output is more important. You want to have a strong franchisor. You heard that earlier. Having a strong franchisor, having a franchisor that's profitable doesn't hurt you, it helps you. Makes your business sustainable. Look to your potential income. Don't worry about the franchisor and what they're making, as long as they are profitable. You want to worry about your return on investment. Qualify all the franchisors, go through the steps on it. By the way, if you got a franchisor that's willing to negotiate everything with you, get up from the table quickly, go home, because that means they need to make payroll and they need your franchise fee. Be careful of what they'll agree to negotiate. Closing advice. Focus on the information. Don't get caught up on the sales process. The franchise salesperson is gifted. He's done it many times. It's your first time at the rodeo. Do your research. Become a knowledgeable investor. Read my book. Read the IFA. Read a lot of literature. There's tons of articles out there. Read it. Read the FDD. Read it. I mean, page to page. It's really boring, but read it. It's important. If you're going to work with a broker, understand they work for the other guy. They're good people, but they're there to sell you a franchise. That's what they do for a living. It's just like going into a car dealership. They want to sell you a car. Be organized, accumulate the information, Don't think that you're going to remember every piece of data. They're all going to be fungible at a point in time. They're all going to seem the same. Use the workbook that's available for free. Get a yellow pad. Capture the information. Always engage an experienced franchisee lawyer. If you sign an agreement and you don't have a lawyer, and 2 years from now there's something comes up which you say, gee, I'm going to sue my franchisor, we will rip your heart out in a litigation if you come out and say, I didn't have a franchisee lawyer, I didn't read my agreement, I just signed it because they told me to. You're all adults. Read the agreement, get advice. It's important. Don't rush. It's not in your interest. The franchisor is not going anyplace. That location is not being sold tomorrow. There aren't 50 people waiting to buy that location. I don't care what they say to you, okay? It will be there, or it will be in another brand. This is not a rush, okay? Nothing's happening. So take your time. There's a big investment. Things to watch out for. If you got a high-pressured franchise salesperson, a franchisor wants the sale closed well. Don't get pressured. Follow the opportunity. The franchise salesperson doesn't need to close it that day. If what they're saying to you is not the same that's in the book, what's in the book, the FDD, is what's going to count. All right? If you're in a registration state and you keep coming up with that, call the state regulator and tell them that what the salesman's doing is wrong. Or tell the franchisor, because he's going to be interested in what's going on.
Good franchisors are not going to want sales that way.
I mean,
the IFA does a lot of programs to try and help franchisors get to the right motivations where the salespeople are telling, they want you to be successful, and if the salespeople are using these kind of tactics, the franchisor is not happy.
Keep in mind that after you finish with the franchise salesperson, you're going to go to a bunch of people that are going to help you find the location. They want to make certain that you understand what the deal is. Then you're going to get passed on to a bunch of people that are going to help you, train you and then follow up with operations. They want to make certain that you got into the same deal that they're operating. They're not happy if the franchise salesperson, to make his commission, told you something wrong. Franchisors want to know if you're not getting the fair scoop. Speak up. Communication is important. You're going to be part of an investment. If the franchise salesperson doesn't follow through, then likely the franchisor won't be following through in his obligations also. So if they say to you, we'll get back to you Tuesday, and they get back to you a week from Tuesday, that's the culture. You got to get into the culture of the franchise system. Do they care, or are you just a commodity? Make sure that they follow through. Poor validation. I pick up the phone, I call a franchisee, he says the worst franchisor possible. Every franchisor has one. Listen to them. There's a bunch that go from A to Z. Call a lot of them. Remember, though, that if you're in Seattle and you're calling only franchisees in Seattle, franchisees may not want to have another person in the same market with them. They might think that you're going to take away some sales. Call franchisees in various markets. Really important. They may not have the time to talk to you. Set up an appointment. Don't expect them to talk to you on the phone immediately. They're running a business. Make a call that's convenient to them. But ask them the questions and have a good list of questions, and they're available in lots of places. But get validation. Look at the history of litigation. Understand what's good litigation, what's bad litigation. Also, look at the litigation history of the management. Understand that I would rather have a poor franchise system and exquisitely great management than have a great franchise system and lousy management. Okay, I buy into the franchisee's management. That's what you want to read more than almost anything else. What's their background? What's their experience? What other brands were they involved in, and how did those brands do? There are some franchise management guys who I wouldn't touch them in a heartbeat because I knew what their old system did. Look at what the history is. History is important. Make sure you're getting enough training. Make sure that the training is both on the job and classroom. Ask what they're teaching. In the FDD, there's a chart that tells you how long you're going to be in training, what's going to be OJT, what's going to be in classrooms. Understand what the subjects are. You have the right to see the manuals, or at least the chart, the table of contents. Understand that if the manual's 5 pages or 500 pages, are there forms, procedures? Ask to see the manual. Good franchisors will let you see the manual all the time. Make sure the franchisor is financially stable. Make sure they don't need your franchise fee to stay alive. Not every franchisor is financially stable. Look at the trend lines. Look at whether they have any reserves. Make sure they have some cash. Cash is good to have. It's not all going to be in receivables. Unit economics, do a business plan. Take it to your accountant, invest some money, but make sure that the bottom line of that franchise system can pay back its debt. You do not want to have 90% debt if the business can't afford to pay back 90% debt. I personally wouldn't buy a franchise with 90% debt in my worst day. That to me is just suicidal, because I've seen too many franchise systems. When 2007 came and the market took a dip down, people couldn't pay their debt. We're not always going up. There's sometimes dips in the market. Make sure that that franchise system can consistently pay its debt service, or borrow some more money from mom and dad. That's the only way to go. Thank you all.
Thank you.